So we're on page 133, the next paragraph, Vihine. Vihine, ha-nefesh habamis, ha-nefesh habamis, hagam kishmoy keinu shu bahami v'tivi. The name, Bahamis, tells us what it is. It's a behemoth. Ever heard a chassid saying, you're a behemoth? Guess what? We all have a behemoth inside ourselves.
Or wilde chaya.
Or wilde chaya, but that's Yiddish, wilde, but behemoth, v'tivi. And guess what? It's not out of the ordinary. It's normal. It's teva, it's nature. What's out of the ordinary is to be a refined Jew, living with the nefesh elikis. You know, the famous story that they say, the father comes to the rabbi, he says, Rabbi, my son is Meshuggah. He says, why is your son Meshuggah? He wants to marry a non-Jewish girl. He cracked up. The rabbi says, if you tell me that the non-Jewish girl, that the non-Jewish girl did, is something weird and strange and not normal, I could hear why your son is also not normal marrying such a person, but that he's married a non-Jewish girl, that's natural. His nefesh habamis wants to have a pretty girl. She happens to be non-Jewish. Should she marry her? So he's not Meshuggah. He's very normal, except that he has a Torah that he needs to listen to, follow. But he's not there. We have to work on that. But don't tell me he's Meshuggah. And I told
Rebbe,
you
that's not a taiva. We learned about last week.
Of course, it's a taiva, but it's not Meshuggah. No, in the vernacular Meshuggah. In the vernacular Meshuggah. In other words, I told you, I didn't repeat this in a few years, so you won't remember it. But here we go. I got a call one Friday afternoon in the winter about 15 years ago. A lady calls me frantically, says, Rabbi, I have to speak to you. I say it's a half an hour Shabbat. She says, I have to speak to you. I said, go ahead. She says, I read somewhere that you know Kabbalah and you're a Kabbalist and you wrote a... I said, what do you want? Just tell what you want. So she says, my son's crazy. I said, why is your son crazy? Because he met this girl. She's a Jewish girl. Okay, next. So what's the problem? The problem is he wants to have a non-kosher wedding. In other words, they should not have a kosher meal. My son's crazy. So I said to her, your son is not crazy. I think that you and your son have to start talking more to each other. So she called me asking me if her son was possessed by a dibuk. I'm serious. So she wanted to know, me, the Kabbalist, if I could tell her if her son, over the phone, if her son has been possessed by a Kabbalist. I swear, this is what happened. It was Friday afternoon. It was like a preparation for Shabbos like no other. I said, no, my dear, we have here a relationship problem between a Yiddish mama and a modern son, and an American boy. Probably she's from Europe or has still European stuff in her, and he's an American boy, and and all that. So when we say the nefesh habamis is a bahami, and the Rebbe adds the word v'tivi, this behema is natural. It's not unnatural. What's unnatural is to be a Jew, to be a nefesh elikis. That's unnatural. And Alter Rebbe, the Tanya, teaches us that if you're really plugged in, and he tells us how, it's really who you are. But we're talking about on the outside, on the surface. The norm is Bahami. Eloki is not the norm. So the next time you're confronted by someone who says they want to do something outrageous, and you say, this guy cracked up, or she cracked up, or they're not normal, or how could this be, and you're all beside yourself, stop. And just ask yourself, in my own way, do I act sometimes like a behemoth? Oh yeah, why? Because it's natural to overeat and oversleep and overdo and ba 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 ba. And I justify. No. Why for that person is it not natural from where he or she is to be a behemoth? That's what the Rebbe says. Back to the text. Shubahami v'tivi. And therefore, v'korei midos. What's the primary mode in which behemoth expresses itself? In emotions. You know, the concept of intellect being silent but deadly, it's true, but it's not the main area of bahamiyut, of animalistic. The bahamiyut, the behemoth, expresses itself in emotions, in love, in fear, in guilt, in mercy, in every kind of way. You know, I have compassion on someone and I help them and then they kill themselves. Right? We just went through this week and it's the hot topic of the week, right? Probably a lot of these innocent girls and boys who didn't say anything had mercy because he writes them and tells them he's going to commit suicide. Anyway, I don't want to go into it, but that's misplaced compassion. That doesn't mean you have to go and you know, bashmutz a person all over. I'm not taking a stand on that. I'm not ruling. I'm just talking out loud in conversation. But there is misplaced compassion. So the question, I'm sure you've asked yourself, and I've been asked the question, what do you do in shul if you know that there's someone who's been accused of child abuse, etc.? What do you do? Moshe's a gabbai in the shul, Yoini is a gabbai, was a gabbai, whatever. What do you do? I asked this question. I asked it to a few rabbanim because people asked me this question. And the rabbanim that I spoke to, doesn't mean there's no different opinion. They said, you're obligated to let people know, you know, that there's someone here that's, you know, been accused, but you're not obligated to ostracize them from shul and not let him into the shul. That's what they said to me. But yes, people have to know. In fact, one of the letters that I read online about the situation is Rabbi Eisenman of Pesach wrote this long letter. I don't know if you read it. So he calls for, it's online. So he says, you know, it's really, you know, if your son or daughter, your daughter's going to babysit, you shouldn't be sending him themselves in a car that the parent picks him up. That's what he writes. I mean, that's his suggestion. You know, it's come down to that, you know, when you hear about a prominent person who did so much and you can't trust them anymore, it really shatters the trust level of people, and there's no way around it. You're not going to have anyone, you know, like, oh, I'm going to check in and tell you you could trust me and prove myself. That's never going to happen. Okay? Let's get over it. So you have to take the defense methods to protect your children. So anyway, I don't want to get into this. The point being is, v'ikore midos, the primary area in where the behemoth expresses itself is in the emotions. Nevertheless, now the Rebbe says in the second line, if you think about it, this nefesh habamis is a real behemoth. And if it's a real behemoth, what use do I have of it? Says the Rebbe, yesh b'mayla gedola. It does have a great virtue. Wow. Tell me about it. And he says, it's one of its milos, one of its virtues is, Velvel, that it is apt. The word olul in English is apt. This is great in Yiddish. Ze muchan in Hebrew. It is an energy, Avram, that is apt to have emotionalism, hispalut. And what's special about that, tells us the Rebbe. The teva ha'alulius, the root of the word is alul. from the line before, the last word. The teva ha'alulius, the nature of this adaptation, lehispoil, to emotionalism, humayla gedayla. That's my contention. There's not enough hugging. I'm serious. Not enough warmth. What Reb Shlomo Carlebach did 50, 60 years ago, the kernel was very pure and right. Give the person a hug, a man, a woman to a woman. But the point is, and I see it. I just say, my son-in-law, Eli, he's the rabbi at the, I'm telling you, what catch people, and they've come over to me, old, young, middle-aged, is he'll give the guy a hug when he comes into shul. He got him. That's it. That's it. Everything else will follow. The warmth, the emotionalism. There's not enough of that. There's all, did you get a good mark? Did you do your homework? Now, I understand there needs to be rules, but it's gone a little too far. We have to really put back into the school system, like when I feel that even though I was in the 70s and I had my Rebbes who were survivors, but they were Holocaust survivors, right? They were Holocaust survivors, and I felt that warmth exude through the tests and through the learning, and that schlepped me and schlepped us and pulled us to want to be like them, to want to learn better. You see? So the Rebbe says here, the nature of the Nefesh Habamis is such that it's ready and wanting to be emotional. As we see by people, the Yeshub Tomid Bekridus, there are some people that are always cold. And by nature, they don't become emotional. And the Rebbe says something fascinating in the next line. Don't think that they're not emotionalism, Avram, is because intellectually they're blocking their emotion. You hear that, Avi? Gewaltige says they're born cold-blooded. Like you say, a yek is a yeke, a Sephardi is a Sephardi, an Ashkenazi is an Ashkenazi, a Chassid is a Chassid. A cold person is a kalte excuse me, Pasha, I need some water, please. A kalte mensch. It's not that the intellect is telling him, you be cold. No, we're not talking about that. Why? Moshe, why? Because the Rebbe's argument is, by nature, the natural tendency of every Nefesh Habamis is alul lihispoel. It's apt, it's ready to be emotional, to be warm. So why isn't it? The answer is because sometimes the nature of the person is such that they're cold. Let's see how he develops it. The heinem is the chlavus I have to be seichel and midasu. Although, generally speaking, the difference between intellect, logic, and emotions, it is. The seichel umesinas v'syashvus. Seichel is patience and calmness, right? Thoughtfulness. Don't rush. Think it over. Umidos and the emotions, hein hisrakshus v'spilus. This is a very good comparison and definition of the two. I'd like you to make a note about this. Right here. Seichel, he tells us Seichel has two things in it. You understand? Mesinut, to be masun, right? Which means patient. V'hisyashvus, to be settled. Midos, emotions are just the opposite. Hisrakshut, lisraget, to get very worked up, right? V'hispailut, and to get very nispael, to get very emotional. Says the Rebbe, Yeah, yes, yes.
The word hit, it's rapture, it's feeling. Reggae,
Reddish
feeling.
feel. I know, but
Okay, wait. And the hit is reflexive. So therefore, you're causing yourself to become very feeling,
okay,
right?
okay,
And the word the pilot is excited. You're causing yourself to be
right.
excited.
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Excitement. Thank you very much. That's a better word than the emotionalism in this case. The excitement. Very good.
Okay.
But look at the next line. Hine hamisinut v'yisyashvut. Patience and settlement, like einoi inyan akridus, does not equal being cold. See, people make a excuse me. People make a mistake. You're only thinking, who are the patient people? The cold type of people. Says the Rebbe, no, it's a mistake. No. There's a difference between cold and being patient. You can be a very warm person, and if you've developed yourself to have patience, you'll be patient, and at a time when you get involved or do whatever it is, you're very warm. So that's why he says, Hine hamasinut vayisyashvut eino. It is not similar to klirut, to coldness. Belazois, Hine klolis inyan klirut, who eina mitzad haseichel. He goes back to his point. Klirut, apathy. Apathy is not because the person's logic and mind dictates be cold. Kiyim kachu tivo urigilusoi mibli hahergish. Mibli hisragish, excuse me. This is his nature and his habit to be without, I guess, excitement, feeling cold. In other words, the opposite of excitement, the opposite of feelings. So where does it come from? It says, I'll tell you the big secret. It comes from a rove. He says rove, not always. But usually, it comes from yeshut, ego, va'avas atzmai, and self-love. In other words, you're involved in something which calls for excitement, as Yonason said so beautifully. Why aren't you excited? Why are you standing there like a cold fish? Because you have a deep ego. And like, who cares? Who cares? Have you ever been in a situation where people are all excited about something and you go over to someone and he's standing there like a cold-blooded, I don't want to use the word, but you know what I mean. And yeah, why? The answer is because everything in front of him is meaningless to him, because he feels that he's better than them, and all of this is nonsense. A person who is a big shot, inside a big shot, like, what are you, stupid? Like wasting your time on, I don't want to say who, but a great scholar, he came into to someone's home, and the person, and he looked on the bookshelf. He had a big library, and he looked at the library, and he saw a certain sefer. And he turns to him and he says, "What are you doing with that sefer in your bookshelf?" So he says, "I bought it. I got it. I'm not using it. I look at it. It's a good." He says, "Stop wasting your time." They were very, very sharp. And I'm going to call a spade a spade. In this area, he was a big shot. The Rebbe would have never said that. Never. In a million years. Guaranteed. The Frierdiker Rebbe would have never said that. The Rashab would have never said that. Because in this area, they didn't have ego. They eliminated their ego. And others didn't. So ego is a very, very subtle thing. And I think I told you, but I was discussing this in shul the other day, this idea of Bittul Hayesh is such a Chabad concept, although it's not originated in Chabad, but you won't find in any Hasidic community such discussion and such wordage and such elaboration on the concept of the Yesh and the Bittul Hayesh, the ego and the obliteration of ego. But the Rabbeim, from the Alter Rebbe, from his Likutei Torah, from his Tanya, that is a main theme. And my friend, Professor David Seaman of Emory University, a Shomer Shabbos genius, Harvard graduate, he was writing, I hope he's going to do it, a book on Bittul from the Chabad perspective. Because he honed in and he understood that the Chabad unique approach is Bittul. You know, Reb Shlomo used to koch sich in the Ishbitzers, right? The Ishbitzer Svarim. It's another Nakuda. A very important one, but a whole different aspect. The Kotzker has their aspect. Moshe is going up to Tveria, to the Tzaddikim there, right? The Kalisker, the Varka. You told me about your Rebbe Zay, great Zayda, the Varka. It's a whole different notion. I'm giving you a little food for thought, Moshe. It's a whole different notion in the Hasidic world. They don't talk much about this Bittul Hayesh. Chabad does. And you know that famous saying, which has to be said and understood in the right context. But I think it's worth mentioning. 3 Hasidic groups: Breslev, Ger, and Chabad. Breslev is always speaking about Simcha, Simcha, Simcha. And many of them are very depressed, very hard on themselves, not happy. We're talking about, Ger, Hasidus Kotz, Ger, Emes. Kotzker was no do anything for truth. And the saying on the street is they're the biggest false people around. Chabad is always talking about Bittul, obliteration, self, and the biggest Bali Gaiva. It's a joke, but there's truth to it. But the fact is that Rabbeim, so we're learning over here, it's a fascinating thought. Hillel's not here. It's good to see how you would see this from how does psychology see it. I tried getting Rabbi Dr. Avram Twersky when I interviewed him. It's in the interview in my book Conversations with the Rebbe. I asked him about he taught Tanya in Pittsburgh, and I asked him about these things, and he said some, but I would have loved to have continued seeing how he, from a psychological perspective, understands this idea. And this is one of the ideas here, where the Rebbe says that krirus, apathy, comes primarily because of yeshus and self-love, not because the mind tells the person, be cold. I think that's a very, very interesting, something that can be studied and discussed and developed. Yes, Moshe.
Rabbi David, can you just repeat that again, please?
Yes. The Rebbe says here, the previous Rebbe, our Maimon says, Al Harov, very important to know that he says, usually. You have the words, Moshe? You have it, yeah? Val Harov, usually, most times, krirut, apathy, bo mitzad hayeshut ve'avos atzmai. It comes because of the yesh of the ego and self-love. Meaning, and it's not because the mind blocks the feelings from going to the heart and being excited and emotional. It's not because of that. That's a very, very telling statement that needs a lot of discussion and you know what I'm saying? He says it, but prove it. Why? How? But that's what he says. Then he says, let's continue another few minutes. V'yesh mi shetivoi cham. Then you have someone whose nature is cham, he's warm. Umisragish, and he gets excited, umisragish, emotional, umispoil, and excited, benokil, very easily. Hanikra b'lashon ne'adam, as the vernacular goes by, as people say, in Yiddish, this is a good Yiddish expression. A hitziger mensch. The word for heat and temperature in Yiddish is avi, hitz. Frierdiker Rebbe, our author, in 1921 had typhus and he was very sick, and he almost died from the high temperature that he had. So a chassid said to him, and he was speaking, and it sounded, you have such temperature, you could sound cuckoo, a sugar. You could say things that. So someone said, "Eret von hitz." He's talking from heat. And then later the comment came, be very careful saying that about the Frierdiker Rebbe. You don't want to play with him. A hitziger mensch means a hot-blooded, passionate person who is easily excited. And the next few words. Und tut ab azach bihisrakshus. And when he does something, he does it with excitement. But look at the next words. Nit ausgerechnet. He doesn't do it calculated. And that's why, Chevre, sometimes we ourselves or others do something and it throws us for a loop. But if that person is the type that is a hitziger mensch, is a hot-blooded, passionate person, what he does is nicht ausgerechnet. It's not calculated. So for us, if we're more Moshe, the proper type of person, it's wild. I'll give you an example. I'm finishing now a pictorial book that I told Moshe about, and many of the pictures are of my mashpir of Yoel Khan. So someone sent me a picture last night, and I had to quickly get it into my designer because it was great. It's a picture in 1983. They're in the Catskills in Parksville, New York, up there by Liberty, next to Liberty, New York. And it's each year they have for the Rebbe's father's yahrzeit a Yarchi Kala. So it's August of 83, and rabbis from all over the world, Rabbi Farkash from Yerushalayim, Rabbi Kosil Farkash, Rabbi Segel from Yerushalayim, Yosef Segel, Rabbi Ezra Shochat from Los Angeles, my friend Rabbi Steinmetz from Detroit. Tell me, the idea is to bring the top Torah scholars of Lubavitch, of Chabad, all in one setting for one weekend to talk Torah, discuss Torah, Farbrein. So you have all these people, and Rabbi Shochat, I think, is like talking, and they're all standing around the table, and then you have Rabbi Yoel Khan there without a hat and jacket, with a hand on a soda bottle. It's such a telling picture of who the man was. He was totally in a different world. And they're all formal, you know what I'm saying? Hats and jackets and rabbis. And he could put them all in his little pocket. Looks like me with my suspenders. People have commented on my videos. We love your videos because of your suspenders. I'm talking about borough parkers. I'm not talking you guys in Bet Shemesh. You guys are cool. But the borough parkers are so narrow. A rabbi speaking words of Torah, teaching, and he doesn't put on a hat and jacket. Hey, what a crime. So I have a friend, he's a good friend, I love him. He says, I love your videos because of your suspenders. It's uncalculated. That's what I learned from Reb Yoel. I mean, it happens to be he, I, and others are that style. But the concept is that you need to know. So sometimes when something happens to you, or let's say in a relationship with a spouse, what if one spouse is more calculated and the other spouse is less? What if one spouse is more cold and one is warm? What do? You can't make a go of it? Yes, you can. If you know what's the trigger, you can make a relationship work. But you really have to figure it out and respect each other's strengths and deficiencies. Then you can have a good marriage. But if the cold one expects her or him to be like he or she is, cold, apathetic, calculated, or the warm one expects them to be always passionate and warm, you're gonna have a breakdown. You're gonna have constant bickering and fighting. And that's not the way it should be. Where does it say in the Torah that spouses have to be exactly alike? I mean, sometimes they're more alike, they're more similar, and other times they're not. And guess what? It can be great. My wife and I, she comes from certain parents, I come from certain parents. We're different in many ways. Baruch Hashem, we're 37 years married, and you could work it out. If there's respect, and there's understanding. And understanding, I clearly say, of the differences. Not understanding what we share in common, that's a given. But of the differences. And to grow from each one's differences, you can have a great marriage, you can have a great relationship, and the same is true with a Rebbe, a teacher, and students. Sometimes, I'm sure, if you think back about your teachers and your professors over the years in school and in yeshiva, wherever you went to, and, sometimes you say, I didn't relate to that teacher, I didn't relate to that Rebbe. The question is, why not? Why didn't you relate to them? And it could be you were too immature to find a way to understand who they are and where they're coming from for you to make that relationship work. Chevra, we will Hashem continue next Monday. Have a great Shabbos Mevorchim. Shabbos Mevorchim Shvat. Make the best of it. Great learning together. Have a great day, everyone. Sei gesund. Bye-bye.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Thank you,
Good
Benjamin.
Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.